Hello all, I'm back with another episode of Off Your Soccer. I've been away for a week enjoying the sunshine. It's very rare I get to go away and actually, especially we're sort of in the UK, and get to catch some nice weather, so that made a very nice change. In my week away, however, a lot has been going on in the world of football, so there's plenty to catch up on today before the action starts next week with the Charity Shield. There'll be some championship games too to maybe catch up on, obviously, but we want to focus primarily on the Premier League, and there's been a lot of clubs active, Manchester United being one of those. Also West Ham, when this kind of merges the two together. We're starting with Aaron Wan-Bissaka today. So Aaron Wan-Bissaka has been linked with West Ham for a number of weeks now. There's been one or two clubs, aside from West Ham, rumoured to be interested, one of those being Inter Milan more recently, but it's looking from the sounds coming out from different journalists that West Ham is where he's going to be going. He's been a good player for United to an extent. He obviously is fantastic in the tackle, great in one-on-one situations. But I do think when they signed him, they expected his attacking game to have come on an awful lot more than it has. There hasn't been that development there. I remember Gary Neville playing for United. Sort of when he came into the team, he's crossing, from my perspective, when I was younger watching the games, left a lot to be desired, and that felt like it sort of evolved as his relationship with David Beckham grew over the years. I seem to notice Gary Neville's attacking ability improved. That relationship in particular, I think, really helped him in that regard. And with Wan-Bissaka, I think there would have been a hope there that there would have been somebody he could have built a relationship with, and you would have seen his attacking output improve. It kind of helped in that he would have had a number of different managers to have played under, and he would have been asked to do a number of different things over the years. But he hasn't really hit the heights that Manchester United would have wanted him to have hit, and it's understandable now. For the last probably 2 or 3 seasons, a move away from Manchester United has looked on the cards. But he can bring a lot to other teams, as I've just mentioned. His ability in one-on-one duels is fantastic. If you're looking for a more defensive-minded right back, somebody can. It's not something that is associated with him because he's pretty much only played at right back for his entire career, with a stint at left back for Manchester United last season. However, you could see his skills being put to good use in central areas of the pitch. People may worry about his position, but if you were to use him as a right centre back in a back three, for example, I could imagine that being suiting him quite well. He's got good pace. I think there's potential for him there to be used in a defensive midfield role. Not something I can see West Ham opting to do, but there's definitely something there in that respect when you note that he's not the strongest going forward. I think before the evolution of fullbacks, he probably would have been viewed as being at the highest level, what teams would have wanted from a fullback going back sort of 20, 30 years, especially in the 1990s. He would have been a fantastic option for a lot of teams. But with the way the game's evolved, his skill set just doesn't sort of complement the modern way of playing football very well from a fullback perspective. I think he can be a good use to West Ham. It's hard not being a regular watcher of West Ham and not being a regular watcher of Julian Lopetegui's teams to know how he might use him. I think these days, anyone playing that position, you need some sort of attacking output from, and it's limited from Aaron Wan-Bissaka. If they're looking at using him in a primarily defensive role and sort of the setup facilitates using him in that position, then I could see him being of great use to them. He would be a signing that you would expect him to more than likely see out the rest of his career there, barring maybe one more move. It's not going to be a signing which comes necessarily with a high resale value for West Ham. Maybe unless he has a couple of fantastic seasons and then a big European club come in because they want to use him in a particular way. You'd think that West Ham may well be the last move of his career. So the fee will be good though. It's not as if it's going to be it would be a signing where they're spending an extortionate amount of money and they're hoping it goes really well. Otherwise they'll have egg on the face. He's only got a year left. A £15 million fee has been mooted. So I think it would be a good move for West Ham and a good move for Aaron Wan-Bissaka with very limited downside. But we will see what happens. Let us know what you think. West Ham, we will have a couple more West Ham related transfers to touch on shortly. However, just before we do move on to those, a quick word on the potential move that we touched upon in the last episode before I went away for a break. That was Federico Chiesa to Spurs. Just before I was due to finish the episode, the news broke that there was some interest there, but that fizzled out very quickly. It doesn't look like that's on the cards at all. I think there's been a strong effort on Juventus' side to try and put his name out there and link in with clubs, perhaps from his agent too, to get something happening. It looks like, whatever's happened there has caused a chasm between the two, and it looks like Chiesa is not going back to Spurs. I don't know how true it is, but I saw a fee reported earlier that Juventus would be interested in accepting around the £60 million mark, and it does seem incredibly low. I know obviously we're not looking at a long contract term there for Chiesa at the moment. It's not like he's tied in for years to come, but even so, you would have expected more there. So Juventus are obviously very keen to move him on so they can reinvest that money elsewhere. It does beg the question though, why are they so keen for him to move on? He looks like an amazingly talented player still, especially when he broke on the scene. You could have imagined all top clubs across Europe being interested in him, and you do wonder why that isn't necessarily the case now. It will be interesting to see where he ends up, but I've got a feeling wherever he does end up, he will have a great season next year. So moving back now on to West Ham United, who have been incredibly busy in the transfer market. We're not even touching on Crescencio Somerville today, who looks to be a potentially exciting signing. I will just say quickly, when you consider that Pablo Fornals, obviously more of a deep midfielder, although he could play in more attacking roles, compared to Somerville, that is, and Saïd Benrahma moved away from the club last year. West Ham did feel like they were caught a little bit short, so Somerville will definitely be able to contribute to the squad in an attacking sense. The signings that they haven't quite got over the line yet are Guido Rodriguez and Nicholas Fulkrug, who look to be, on the face of it, very smart pieces of business. You would look at both of them and say they are at the sort of the later end of their careers, but there are plenty of clubs throughout the Premier League in Europe who would have been more than happy to have got them on their books. So Guido Rodriguez is a strong tackling midfielder, great positional play, good at breaking up play, very experienced, good leadership qualities. And when you consider that, we're not entirely sure why the move fell through, probably likely down to financial reasons. But considering that he was looking like he was going to move to Barcelona at one point, it does look like quite a coup for West Ham. Defensive midfielder, when you consider David Moyes' ridicule comments, I can't remember what the game was last season, but when he talked about how West Ham had never really replaced Declan Rice as a reason for losing one of their games. Well, in all seriousness, he's not over the long term, but over a couple of seasons or two, Guido Rodriguez can definitely plug a gap in that defensive midfield area. If they've got concerns about any of the players sort of in that sort of part of the team moving on, or injuries, I don't think, to be honest, I say they can be concerned about injuries and having someone to fill in there. I think Guido Rodriguez is going to come in and he's going to be a starter in that team. He looks a fantastic prospect. I haven't seen much of him play until recently and brushed up a little bit for this show, and he's a very physical player. He's a good height. I think he's 6'1". He looks well suited to the Premier League too, so it looks like a very canny move for West Ham. He definitely isn't going to be filler for them. I think he could really, really make a difference to their first team and possibly get that midfield up a gear or two. And the same can be said in a different way for Nicholas Fulkrug. He is, I think you'd say, even though he's in the latter part of his career, his exploits for Dortmund, particularly in Europe last year, which really sort of pushed him into prominence. I don't think he's always necessarily been seen as a prolific striker, but what people have noticed, I think more so now, especially playing on that European stage and getting more eyes on him than maybe he's had in the past. He's a clinical player. He's a very clinical striker. He's got good hold-up play. I think West Ham can use him in different ways. You can obviously rely on him for that hold-up play. You can ask him to be a poacher, but he knows where the back of the net is, and that's the most important thing for West Ham. They've often relied on Mikel Antonio up there, up front. It hasn't really worked out for Danny Ings. They definitely needed a striker. It's obvious, as we spoke about on a previous show, they wanted John Duran from Aston Villa. They've not found a way to make that work. And I think there'll be Dortmund fans who'll be wondering why they've let him move on. Yes, that money can be reinvested into a younger striker who can make a difference for maybe a number of years. Again, it could be a classic sort of money could be invested into a classic sort of Dortmund signing, whereby they'll bring somebody in. He can be with them for 2 or 3 years and be able to try and sell him on for double the amount of money. There aren't many players out there these days who do what FULLKRUG does, though. And I think any club would have to really seriously consider why they're moving on that type of player in this day and age in football. I think they're invaluable to have a strong, direct forward with good hold-up play, knows where the back of the net is. They don't grow on trees. It was the old model of a striker, again, like 30 years or so ago, 20 years or so ago even. Thinking back to your Didier Drogba's, for example. These days, it's just not necessarily the standard model. These players are like gold dust, and I think it'd be an excellent move for West Ham, despite the fact I think he's 31 now. But still, that type of striker, you can easily get another 3 or 4 years out of him potentially. He looks like he will be a good move for West Ham, and I'm definitely going to be very interested to see what he does next season. West Ham fans, please get in touch at OffYourSoccer on X. Please tell us how you think each one of Wan-Bissaka, Guido Rodriguez, Nicholas FULLKRUG will get on next season should those moves go through. And please give us your thoughts on Crescencio Somerville as well. Okay, so moving on from West Ham United, and look, it's still staying in London. We're going to have a little look at Conor Gallagher now. It's an interesting situation. Conor Gallagher has come through the Chelsea Academy, played regularly last season. He was an important player under Mauricio Pochettino, and yet Chelsea seem determined to move him on. They've accepted offers in the past from clubs. And Gallagher stayed there, almost, I wouldn't say proven people wrong, but he's proven his value to Chelsea if there was any doubt over that. It's quite obvious why Chelsea are looking to move him on. They can really balance the books with that move from a PSR perspective. He would be pure profit for them being an academy player. They know they can bring in a lot of money for him. Everybody knows Chelsea have spent an awful lot of money on players. So from a purely financial perspective, yes, it makes sense for Chelsea to move him on. But in terms of replacing him, if you felt you needed to replace him, you'd probably have to re-spend the money you got for him. I don't think Chelsea would be looking to do that, though. They're stacked in that midfield. To name a few, you've got Levy has just come back from, injury. Probably better to say he's actually having a pre-season this year, and it looks like he can really contribute to Chelsea going forwards. You've got Enzo Fernandez, you've got Moises Caicedo, amongst many others. So Chelsea aren't exactly struggling for centre midfielders at the moment. But it'd be interesting to know what you all think about, Chelsea fans, what you think about Conor Gallagher potentially moving on. Does it hurt to have an academy player, one of your own, sort of ripped away from you just for the sake of PSR, or do you not mind? Does he not have that greater impact? And actually, a lot of the conversations around this move have had too much of a sentimental tone to them, and it really would be in Chelsea's better interest if Conor Gallagher was to move on. I think if I were Conor Gallagher, I think I'd be seriously considering it. On the one hand, I wouldn't feel wanted. I think Chelsea's contract offer, if what was reported was true, of a 2+1 contract, I'd find that pretty insulting. You're looking at a new contract. You look at the contracts that they've offered to other players. Yes, there are different reasons for that. But you're thinking, well, you signed him last year and you offered him like a 5, 6, 7, 8 year contract, and you're offering me 2 years +1. You would think that it's a token gesture and they're not serious about keeping you. On the flip side, you might want to dig your heels in and go, I'm not being moved on, and I love this club, I want to stay here, I'm not being moved on purely from a financial perspective. The manager's probably on board with you staying there, and he doesn't mind. It'll be the boardroom that want to move you on. So if Conor Gallagher does decide to stay, I'm sure he'll play, but he's not going to be getting a better contract than the one on the table unless he has a stellar season next year. Atletico could be a good move. You look at his attributes, he's a good runner, he's a good striker of the ball, but he's seen maybe fairly or unfairly as a dogged midfielder. He offers you legs in there, and you could see him working really hard for Simeone and doing a really good job for his Atletico Madrid side. And even if Conor Gallagher was out there, even if it was just for a year, I think he could really bring his game on, give him a different experience, which could ultimately make him a better player. But it remains to be seen what will happen with that. I think there was a story out there about Chelsea accepting a slightly lower offer from Atletico than they would from a Premier League rival, which is understandable to a degree, but it feels quite unfair on Conor Gallagher to offer him such a short contract, regardless of what the terms are and if they're high terms, and then to go, okay, we kind of want you, we're kind of not really bothered, but we're not going to let you join a rival, we want to sell you abroad. We're not going to lower your price for a team just to get you off the books. It feels kind of like Chelsea want to have the cake and eat it. At the same time, though, if you are Conor Gallagher, the writing's on the wall. There might be limited options available to you, but do you want to stick around at a club who don't appear to really want you there? It's a very complicated situation. Please let us know what you think, Chelsea fans. Check us out on X and get in touch. Next, still it's pretty much a London-centric sort of day today. We're looking at a former Watford player. Ismaila Sarr has made the move to Crystal Palace. He is essentially replacement for Michael Elise, although they have some very big shoes to fill, and that's just been emphasised even further by Elise's performance at the Olympics so far. You look at his main competition in that side, and with Elise moving on, there is a chance for him to really cement a starting role in that team. But you would look at that move, and what you would say is he got linked with a lot of big clubs when he was at Watford. He was linked with the likes of Liverpool and Manchester United. It almost felt inevitable at one point over the course of a couple of seasons that he would make that move. He almost made the move to Aston Villa at one point too, as they were on the ascendancy, and that didn't materialise. And you do wonder why his career never quite hit the heights it did. He obviously spent some time in the Championship too for Watford. You'd say they're the main concerns with the move. Is he a Premier League player after all? Will he fulfil that early promise? If he does, he's a decent age still, and if he has a good season or two, you could imagine some of the bigger Premier League clubs going, the penny's dropped, it's time to make our move. But for Palace, I think it's a great move for Ismaila Sarr, and it's a great chance for him to show that he can cut it at this level in a Palace team that's growing nicely at the moment and developing well. But for Palace, I mean, again, it's a good move for Palace too. It's not a massive fee that's been spent on him. If it doesn't work out, you probably will recoup a decent chunk of that too if he was to move on after a year. So it will be good to see what he does at Crystal Palace next season. Moving on to our next section, and it is, according to YouTube, it's a new segment that we brought in last week, and today we will be looking at Jake O'Brien. Now, I did take a little look earlier just to see what superlatives YouTube were throwing around in relation to Jake O'Brien, and to be fair, they weren't getting too carried away. I think there was one standout on there. Let's have a little look and see if we can find that again. Here we go. Jake O'Brien is a goal-scoring brick wall. Welcome to Everton. Fantastic. Absolutely love it. So let's click on one of the links and have a look. So yeah, straight away you can see some pretty good passes actually, to be honest. Some fantastic blocks in there. Yeah, some great tackles too. It's just cycling through things you'd expect to see from a defender moving to the Premier League, but what does stand out to me is his physique, his presence. You could see him forming a really good partnership with Jared Branthwaite at the back for Everton. Definitely going to be one to watch next season. I think if he looks as good as his clips, which is obviously a big if, and we say this about all players, it's easy to do some YouTube scouting, but if he lives up to what it looks like he could be, Everton have made a terrific signing, and it really does take the pressure off if they do lose Jared Branthwaite over the next year or two. They've got a ready-made replacement potentially there. From their perspective, he hopefully won't be a replacement. He will be someone to complement Jared Branthwaite. I am very much looking forward to seeing how he gets on this season. The final segment for today is Off Their Soccer. this is a section where we look at some of the more eyebrow-raising things that have happened or been said across the Premier League, potentially beyond. But today it is very much a Premier League entry, and it is from Fulham offering between 20 to 23 million pounds for Scott McTominay after spending 27 plus 7 million pounds in add-ons for Emile Smith-Rowe, a player who has played less than the equivalent of 4 full games of football last season and hasn't scored a goal for some time, as opposed to a player who scored 10 times for Manchester United last season. Not to mention the goal scored for Scotland. Just make it make sense. Scott McTominay, a very experienced player. 20 to 23 million pounds feels cheap. United apparently are willing to accept approximately 25 million pounds, which does feel like a steal. No matter what people may think about Scott McTominay, he's a proven Premier League player at this level. And if you're looking at teams in and around sort of mid-table and below, the money that other players go for these days, for somebody you know is likely to get you between 5 to 10 goals this season, it just seems crazy that they will have come in what was apparently their third bid at around that 20 to 23 million pound mark. So hopefully that's a deal that gets over the line, and Fulham see reason, but they are my choice for Off Their Soccer for today. Anyway, thank you for listening, everybody. If I sound a little bit off, or have sounded a bit off today, it's because I'm not 100%, so I do apologise if you can't make out everything I'm saying today, but hopefully I will be back on form soon. Thank you for listening, and I will speak to you later.